anyone who knows me well would probably tell you that I've always been into comic books and superheroes. That I've always loved Spider-Man. I've always collected everything. Truth is, that's not the truth. And I know it's even hard for me to believe, because it's hard for me to imagine not collecting comic books, not collecting the figures, the memorabilia, the autographs, watching all the movies, watching the animated shows. But there was a time when I didn't even know who Spider-Man was. I knew the name. And it was that curiosity about why he was so popular that got me into comics in the first place, to even read my first one, which I remember exactly which one it was. And that pattern would continue with Star Wars and Harry Potter. But I guess I shouldn't really have been that surprised that I would get into these stories. Because historians have said that when you look at our modern day superhero stories, or the hero's journey type stories, including Star Wars and Harry Potter, they all have a basis centuries ago. Back to the time of the Romans, the Greeks, and the Greek myths, which as a kid I loved. I don't know how many times I had my parents read this book to me, or how many times I tried to read it. I mean, it was a simplified version of the stories. It even says specifically arranged for children 5 and up. So the stories are very much simplified. There's a little bit about them at the end. And yes, since all those years ago, I have read the actual myths. I know the larger stories for most of them. But I've never really lost my love of the Greek myths specifically. Now, since then, I have gotten interested in Roman myths, even Egyptian myths to a certain degree when it comes to their gods and their beliefs. But the Greek stories have always stuck with me. Now, while they are a fundamental basis of our human society, we know these stories. There's probably not a single person on earth who doesn't know at least of these stories, of the characters, except if they're newborns. How do you modernize these stories? How do you keep their importance alive? Well, Rick Riordan, I think, did a great job of doing just that. Telling the old stories, but also updating them for a more modern audience. With his Percy Jackson books, with his Kane Chronicles, and so on and so forth. And while I will say, in general, they're all pretty good and they're entertaining and they're fun and they're definitely educational as a whole. And it's clear he did his research. Some are better than others. So today, I want to take a look at his series and rank them from worst to best. Looking at characters, story, arc, payoff. Now, this isn't to say that I don't recommend all these series, because they're all good in their own way. But there are some that just stuck with me longer and that I like more than others. So let's take a look at Rick Riordan's Greek stories and see where they fall in this ranking. This is Rick Riordan series ranked. Coming in at 5th place, we have Magnus Chase. Now, the main reason I have this series in last place is because of the ending. Now, I'm not going to spoil how it ends, but it is the most lackluster of the endings for me. There's no payoff, especially if you've read any of the other series. You're expecting something bigger, something grander. And you just don't get that. It feels like there should be another book. Now, I kind of understand why he went the way he did a little bit, because it's a different take on his other stories. He wanted to show a different side of humanity, or a different side of these characters. But when you've established in your previous series that you're going to end on some grand type scale and some big payoff, that's what people are expecting. And this series did not deliver on that. Now, I do like the world he's created from these Norse mythology. I like how they're incorporated into all of the other stories. I think Magnus Chase is an interesting character. Definitely a different version of the hero than what we've become accustomed to in the other series. And I like how he has a relationship with one or two other characters that we've met before in other series. So there is that bit of tie-in. His friends are interesting. The journeys that they all go on are fun. But it doesn't leave the same impact that the previous series do. I really do feel like maybe it needed one more book. Maybe you need another grand adventure to build up to this huge finale and deliver on what fans have come to expect from them. The character development is good, and his friends and companions along the way are definitely funny at times. But this series just doesn't leave the same punch. It doesn't leave you wanting the next chapter after every single book like some of the other series do on this list. So that's why I'm going to say Magnus Chase is number 5 on this list. Coming in 4th place, we have The Trials of Apollo. Now, right off the bat, the finale for me is similar to the Magnus Chase finale. While we do have more than 3 books in this series, and the finale definitely is more action-packed, it's more what we expect having read the earlier books. And that's where it's definitely better than Magnus Chase. But the final payoff and that final battle between Apollo and his arch nemesis just doesn't feel impactful. I don't care about it. Now, if it was real, oh yeah, we'd all be so concerned and worried because our world is in danger. But the way it was written and descriptions, I just never felt myself on the edge of my seat or bearing on every single word that the narrator was saying in my ear. I just didn't. And the final confrontation and how it ends, to be honest, it's kind of silly, and I feel like it's a little bit of a cop-out, especially considering that we've seen other things that he can write about or other ways that he can end series. Apollo as a character, definitely interesting because it's a different take on a hero or a different quest type character for Rick Riordan. But thinking about it, it's not that original either. Because as a comic book fan, right off the top of my head, I think Thor. The plot and the journey that Apollo goes on feels a lot like Thor's, whether it's in the comics or in the movies. So that kind of pushes it lower on the list for me. Also, while I do like that he interacts with all these other characters that we know, especially if you've read the other series and how it ties into everything, that also just feels like episodes. Sure, there's a thin through line of we have to stop these people so that we can get to this person, so we can stop this character, stop this villain by the end of the series. But I also felt like they just threw in these characters that we knew, characters that we wanted to see, because they would have been there, they made sense, but they also didn't feel like they were needed. And at times that actually took me out of the story more. Now, granted, I love crossovers. I love the DC Arrowverse crossover episodes. I love the crossovers that we get in comics. But with this series, I felt like it just didn't really work for me, and things could have been more streamlined. This is definitely a series that might have worked better if you'd shortened down by at least a book, maybe. But overall, it's still an interesting read. Definitely a good story. The additional characters that he introduces in this specific series are definitely fun. I like the girl that is at Apollo's side through the entire thing. She's definitely feisty and fun, and her story, I think, is probably even better than Apollo's. Her character story and her arc through the entire series is definitely probably one of the things I enjoyed most about this book series. So, Trials of Apollo comes in at number 4. Coming in at third place, we have Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the series that started it all. Now, it might seem strange that I have this in the middle of the list. And while, yes, it launched the Rick Riordan universe, and it's a fantastic entry. It really starts building this world. We get all these new characters. Percy Jackson is funny, engaging. He feels like one of us. And then you have Annabeth, who's smart, snarky, and a perfect foil for Percy. You've got their friend Grover, who grows throughout the series and becomes more than just a sidekick. We see Annabeth and Percy's relationship grow very naturally through the entire series. It's just not the best of his series, in my opinion. But I don't see that as a bad thing. That means he started off with this series and he only got better. This series, for me, the ending, the finale, was good. It's what established what a Rick Riordan finale, what a final battle could be like. With the stakes felt real, everything felt impactful. You were concerned about characters dying. You were concerned about what was going to happen. That all started with this series. But while it did a great job of establishing this world filled with gods and demigods and where the myths happened and modernizing them, I feel like the structure didn't quite work, because this is the same problem I had with the Trials of Apollo. I just recently went back because I had problems remembering exactly what happened in each story. I couldn't remember even the characters involved in each story for a certain degree. I had trouble remembering the finale, which that is not a great thing when it comes to a series. Each book was a separate quest, just like the Trials of Apollo were. Yes, you had that through line that would get you to the end, but each one was basically a different summer until the last book or two. A different adventure. And you just had that thin through line, like I said, that connected them all. I never really felt like I need to jump on the next book. Though I definitely felt more in tune and more wanting to read this series than I did with Apollo or Magnus Chase. This is definitely a series I would recommend people read in general, because it's great, it's fantastic, it's funny, it's amusing, it's educational to a certain degree. But it's definitely not the best of his books. Oh, good. Okay, I am not volunteering for a quest again. Oh, that was just way too much. Hi. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, give me 1 sec. Oh, God. Oh, it feels good to sit down. Oh, thank goodness. Oh, thank goodness I'm back where the mist is. Anyway. Ow, yeah. I know I look a little different. I'm wearing different things. I had to go on this thing called a quest. No big deal. Just a little tense, a little tight from that. Anyway, coming in at number 2, we have the Kane Chronicles. Now, what I love about this series is that it revolves around gods and myths and stories that we really don't hear or read or see in the movies a lot. We always see Greek gods primarily, but we know the Norse gods, whether that's Thor and Loki in the MCU and Marvel. We know the Roman gods for the most part because planets are named after them, but you don't really read or see too much about the Egyptian gods. So it's nice to have a book, to have a series that focuses on them so that they just get more time in the spotlight. And while I love that about these books, there's other things about it that are great. Whether it's the fact that you have a different dynamic than you do from the other ones. Where in the other stories, it's primarily friends going on these adventures, these quests, these epic, yeah, so let's just say adventures. And they're learning things along the way and they meet different people. This one is about siblings. It's a brother and sister duo. And it's about their family and how it's incorporated into the Egyptian world, into the Egyptian gods world. And that's a very different take than the other books. I mean, I don't really want to spoil anything, but where, you got Percy, the son of Poseidon, they're not really the son and daughter of gods. So that's definitely different. I like how it's still clearly in the Percy Jackson world, because there is a short story, I believe it's in the second one, where they meet Annabeth, and I think they meet Percy as well. I'm not sure. And their mentor does say at one point, we stay out of the Greek gods on that side of the city, and we stay on this side. So you at least know they're in the same world. But they're totally different characters. You don't have to have read those books to get any of this. So it's nice to have an in-universe story, but that's totally separate from it. Now, I do wonder, I don't know any numbers or anything specifically, but with how connected follow-up series were to that foundation laid down in Percy Jackson, I wonder if this series didn't sell as well. I don't know if it didn't sell as well because of the fact that there were no known characters in it, whether nobody knew if it was connected. I don't know. I mean, for all I know, it sold great. But that's just an interesting thing, that after this, we went back, or I should say Rick Riordan went back to stories that incorporated characters and lore that we generally knew or we liked already, hopefully. Which is why I think this one is so unique and why it's so high on my list. The one issue I do have with it is it's only 3 books. I feel like the second and third one, they're fine. They are connected. They flow fluently. And it just works because they go from this one to this one. It's one continuous story. But there's a time jump between this one and the second one. Here, it's just these 2 characters and their mentor. All of a sudden, in the next book, there's like 6 new people. I feel like it would have been nice to have at least maybe one book where, okay, we have 2 new people, but now we have a mission or quest or whatever they call it, I can't remember, to go find this other person that we really need. He's important or she's important, whoever it is important enough that we have to go help them. And that would have been good, a good second book, and then you could have said, okay, we have a couple more. That's really all you needed. But we got 3 books, and they're great. I like how it's also different, like I said, from the Percy Jackson stories, from the Magnus Chase stories, from the Apollo stories, because it's kind of like a cult mixed with the magical world of Harry Potter a little bit, because there's magic involved instead of godlike powers. There's a secret room, there's a secret place that only magicians know about. There's all this different terminology that makes it feel so different and so unique from the other books. It has its own nice flavor. It stands apart from the other ones, and I love that. And this one also, these stories also are told as if the 2 main characters, I forget what their names are, dropped off manuscripts to somebody, or I guess in this case, dropped them off to Rick Riordan, and he's just writing up what they say. And the chapters actually interact with each other. So like the daughter or the girl might say, yes, I'm getting to that. I get it. I'm going to tell him. He wants me to tell you blah, blah, blah. And I like that. It's unique. Like I said, this is definitely the most off-key, the most different from any of the other ones. And I love it. And it flows really well. The story's good. The action is good. And this one, I also think, is more about family than any of the other ones. The other ones are about friends and relationships, and yes, there is family involved. But if you were going to say what series is purely about the family dynamic, it would be this one. And that is why the Kane Chronicles comes in at number 2. Anyway, coming in at number 1, though, is the Heroes of Olympus. I love this series. I was happy that I got into it late because I was able to read or listen to pretty much the entire series before the last book came out. So I didn't have to wait for each volume or each chapter, each book, whatever you want to say, to come out. Now, this first one, I will admit, threw me off a little bit because I'm like, wait, it's Camp Half-Blood, it's Greek, it's Heroes of Olympus, what's going on? But this sets up a much bigger mystery for the entire series. And I think that's something this one did better than the first one, better than the original Percy Jackson. That one, there was a mystery, but it just didn't really entice you. There was an overall story, but each one still kind of felt like its own unique thing. This one, no. Every single book flows. Every single book is tied into each other. It's like, okay, here's your first movie. All right, now we're going to leave it on a cliffhanger. And here's your second one. It's a very well done series that keeps you engaged, looking forward to the next one. And it puts you back into this world of Percy Jackson. But it does it in a new way. It introduces a lot of new characters. And it feels natural. Though I will say at first, as I started reading it out, like I said, I'm like, what does this have to do with Percy Jackson? He's nowhere to be found. But you find out about that later. But this series as a whole has great action, great character development. Everyone is important. I love how in this book and this series, each chapter is labeled by a different character. I think that's just a unique way of telling the story, and it works. And of course, there's this one big prophecy which throws the entire series into action. And like I said, that is what drew me into the story. That's what keeps you invested. And then they also introduced the Roman camp into this series. So having Greek gods with Roman gods, even though they're the same, and they find an interesting way to explain that as to why the gods are a little bit different, if they're Roman gods or if they're Greek gods. He has fun with that aspect of this. Since in history, the Romans did incorporate the Greek mythology and Greek gods into their own culture, they just changed things up. It's handled very well here. And the finale, obviously I'm not going to give it away, but it is the best finale of the entire series. It's solid action. It's engaging. It's fantastic. It's earned. It doesn't feel cheap. It just grabs you and won't let go. And if any of these series, if I had to recommend just one to somebody, I'd be like, read The Heroes of Olympus. And then if you like this, go back and read the other ones. And this does a good job, like I said, of not only bringing back and talking about the characters that we loved from Percy Jackson, but it incorporates new ones seamlessly, flawlessly. It all just works. And that's why The Heroes of Olympus comes in at number 1. I really should have gotten more nectar from Percy before I left. I mean, oh gosh. That last battle with a giant really... So that is my review and ranking of the Rick Riordan books. These stories are fantastic. I highly, highly recommend them for people of all ages. They're just great. He has found a way to introduce myths and legends and stories of Greek gods, Roman gods, Norse gods, Egyptian gods, all into a modern context in a way that people today understand it. They can grasp the concept much easier. And he explains the differences in a fun and engaging way. For the most part, the stories are solid, the characters are great. Sure, some of the endings might not be as fantastic or feel as satisfying as you might want them to, and maybe they're not long enough. Maybe, like I said with the Kane Chronicles, maybe it would have been nice to have one or two more stories. But as a whole, all these stories and all these series are fantastic. I highly recommend them. If you haven't picked one up, do yourself a favor and go pick one up. While for me, I would highly recommend The Heroes of Olympus. You can always start from the beginning. I know that's where a lot of people like to start. So go do Percy Jackson and Olympians. Or you want to talk about Roman gods, pick up the Heroes of Olympus, like I said. Or Egyptian gods, do the Kane Chronicles. Regardless, these books are very enjoyable. They're educational. They're full of adventure, full of great characters. There's mysteries, there's humor, and they're just a lot of fun. They are the modern version of these stories, and I think they will hold up for quite a while until the next person comes around and figures out another way to make them better or reintroduce the next generation to them. But what about you? Have you read any of these books? If so, which ones were your favorite? What's your ranking of the series if you've read them all? If you haven't, why not? Or just rank a specific series. Whatever it is, however you feel about these stories, let me know down below. Let me know if we share the same enthusiasm for myths and legends and heroes, which I'm sure we share something. I mean, you're watching this video and on this channel. But comment down below and let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, read what you love, enjoy what you love, and let's all work for a better fandom. I'll see you next time.